We know the grid is undergoing massive change, which creates massive opportunities for local energy. The Energy Changemakers podcast offers rich conversations with industry leaders to help you and your company capture opportunities to build a decentralized grid. I'm your host, Elisa Wood. Welcome to the Energy Changemakers podcast. Hey everyone, Elisa Wood here from Energy Changemakers. We are going to talk today about energy efficiency, particularly a ruling that does damage to the ability of energy efficiency to provide full value in wholesale electricity markets. So the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, also known as FERC, earlier this year dealt a blow to energy efficiency, or I like to use the word the negawatt with an N, not megawatt M. It dealt a blow to putting the negawatt on equal footing in wholesale markets, on equal footing with generation like power plants. This decision applied within the PJM market, which is the largest regional transmission organization in the U.S. It serves 65 million people in 13 states and Washington, D.C. So decisions like this within PJM, given its size and scale, have impact. For 15 years, PJM let energy efficiency receive capacity payments alongside generation resources. The reasoning was that when you look at the big picture, negawatts act like megawatts. You can build a power plant or remove the need for it, and it's all the same for the supply-demand balance on the grid. So the FERC decision ended those payments, and we have here with us today to explain what all this means to energy efficiency, Paula Glover. Paula is the president of the Alliance to Save Energy, a position she's held since 2021. And before that, she was the CEO of the American Association of Blacks in Energy. So welcome, Paula. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. I'm very excited about this discussion. It's a little bit on the nerdy side, but our listeners love nerdy discussions, so it's perfect.
I think we all in this business have learned to embrace our inner nerd.
That's a good
just
point.
admit who we are. I'm here for it.
Yeah, tell me about your inner nerd. Tell me a little bit about who you are, how you came to be involved in energy efficiency.
I started my career more than 30 years ago working directly with customers in a small gas company in Connecticut, taking people's bill payments, turning people on when they had been shut off, sometimes being the person who made the decision to shut off a customer. But very early on, I really had a firsthand view and look at the impact that energy bills had on customers and small businesses for that matter, because those were the people who I got to see every single day. And very early on, I learned the importance of what we called back then energy conservation. We didn't really call it energy efficiency. We called it conservation and load management. But I learned very early on how important that was to customers, and being armed with that kind of information for customers when they came in was really, really meaningful. And it was meaningful in terms of what the change in what they had to pay in their bill. And so fast forward all this time now, I'm fighting for efficiency at this other level for the very same reasons, because it's really important for customers. And whether that's a small residential customer, a small business, a large institution or entity, being able to save that money on energy costs that can then be used for other things, whether that's food or paying for school or hiring more people or expanding your operations. All of it is incredibly meaningful. And so that's what I'm doing.
That's so fascinating. You've really been the whole gamut in this industry.
Yeah, that's why when I make that comment about being a nerd, I think I am the ultimate energy nerd. But I also think this is the most interesting business that anybody could actually ever be in.
I got to say, I agree. I love the topic of energy efficiency because there's just so many interesting things about it. One being just what you just pointed out, that it really does have a profound effect on the financials of energy, or the financials of the person who's using the energy. I heard you speak at a conference recently, and you gave a really interesting definition of energy efficiency. It's evolved, it's changed. Could you talk a little bit about what energy efficiency is today?
Yeah, sure. So, energy efficiency today is still doing more by using less. And We do that though in multiple ways. And so early on, people are very, I think, familiar with, right? Making sure our homes are well insulated, make sure we have, double pane windows at least, making sure that we have good seals around our doors. All of those things are ways that we're able to reduce our energy costs. But as time has gone on and we've integrated more technology, we have Energy Star appliances, our HVAC systems, and now we have other kinds of heating and cooling equipment like natural gas and electric heat pumps. We have smart meters and all kinds of other technologies, digital twins, to look at how the connectedness of your technology and your equipment in your buildings operate. So efficiency is just broadened in a way with the advent of technology that's allowed us to, I think, impact people's energy costs in lots of different ways. And so not just kind of the basics, insulation, windows, doors, which we absolutely still need to continue to do, especially when we have all of this extreme weather. But it's also now lighting and HVAC and, your refrigerator and your washing machine, your appliances, all of those things, your meter are also energy efficiency technology.
And demand response too. Doesn't that sort of fit into it? What I'm thinking about is the fact that it seems like a lot of energy has changed. Electricity in particular has changed with the advent of greater use of software and the understanding that time and place are really sort of crucial in the flow and cost of energy. And it seems to me like demand response kind of plays into all of that.
It does. And I would say that demand response is like a great complement. They're like a good efficiency or good pairings, right? So when you install energy efficiency, right, that savings is forever. If I insulate my house, that insulation for as long, whatever that savings is, I'm going to have that savings forever. Demand response is really the ability to turn it on and off, right? It's the ability to have for the utility company to look at my HVAC system, my air conditioning, and say, you know what, I need this thing to be turned up to 78, 80, and not at 72. Because I've got more people I want to serve and I want to have more capacity on my grid. And so you need both of those things go together, right? That technology is what allows the person to be more efficient in terms of what they personally use. But the demand response technology is also allowing the grid operator to control how much capacity is available so that it can serve more people.
So this leads into what we're going to talk about today, I think, because what happens is that the more we can sort of refine this use of time and place for energy, we're also refining it for not using energy. And there's a value to that, right? There's a real value, absolute monetary value.
Yes.
And so let's kind of set the table here a little bit in terms of terms, because we're going to talk about capacity markets today. Can you describe for the listeners, what is capacity versus energy and what are capacity markets?
Yeah, so I think the way I would describe it is in this context is energy is like how much one person, one household, one business, one particular entity uses of energy, how much I use at my house, how much I use in my office, how much my building uses. Where capacity is really how much energy do we need to serve everybody on the hottest day, the coldest day, right, at peak. And so that's the difference that, energy, when we're talking about energy, we're really talking about how much is one particular entity using, where capacity is really how much are we going to need in the most extreme of cases. And efficiency's ability to expand capacity so that you don't have to put another plant online is really the value that we're talking about, right? That if I install something and I have lots of people who install a technology that then reduces how much they use as a collective, that is forever. And that has a value to it, as opposed to like a demand response where you're able to just turn it on and off or push it down and up for a period of time, right? But it's not the same as every single home is built to a building code, like a 2021 building code, for example. And so that usage is going to be really, really low because, right, they have this code that then requires all these other kinds of efficient technologies.
So once we embed energy efficiency into the system,
yes,
we can look at the system and say, hey, we don't need as much capacity. We do not need to build as many power plants.
Right. that even though our demand is growing, we don't need to build as much because we've been able to manage our capacity through energy efficiency technologies.
This is why I love energy efficiency so much. It's almost like getting something for free. I mean, not quite. You have to pay to install the
Yeah,
energy efficiency, but still, it's so much less than, you know, and it
right.
has so much less impact on our environment than actually building a power plant.
Yeah,
So,
and the savings again, right, for people is long term. So it's not 1 month that I have extra money for my grocery bill. Every month I still have that money. Whatever that extra is that I've saved in energy costs that's going to my other expenses, I'm always going to have that because that technology is there all the time. If it was just demand response, I might have it this month, but I might not have it the next month. I might
mhm.
get a little extra because the utility company needed me to shave down, and so I got a payment, but the next month that wasn't necessary, so I didn't get a payment.
So it really underscores.
The differences, right? So they're definitely connected. But what we really want is people to have the technology because that's what they benefit from long term. And
Mhm.
that's what I think the markets and the grid benefits from long term is the adoption of the technology, the long term adoption of the technology.
So this gets into what happened with FERC and PJM, which I tried to characterize at the top of this, but you are so much closer to it. You can do a
Well,
much better job than I just did. So tell me, what did FERC do in this PJM decision, and why is it worrisome?
yeah, so essentially, PJM and Market Monitor and PJM went to FERC and said, "Listen, we don't believe that we should be paying for energy efficiency in the capacity markets because we do not believe that it is measurable and verifiable." And I think what they tried to highlight is that they believe that particularly utility companies were getting payments for efficiency technologies without actually proving that that stuff was actually installed. And that's what they went to FERC with. And essentially, FERC approved them not making those payments any longer. And they've been making the payments up until that point for about 10 years. The Alliance and a group of others, we filed and said, hey, we think you should have a technical workshop. Other stakeholders need to be involved in this kind of conversation, and then let's figure out what is right and wrong. And obviously, our argument would be is that PJM should continue to pay. But if there's something that needs to be happening in terms of being able to measure and verify, I don't know that anyone would say that's not fair, right? What that tool is, I don't know. But let's kind of, you get all the stakeholders together in this workshop setting and you talk all this stuff through, and then you can kind of get to a decision. Unfortunately, what happened is that FERC granted PJM's request, but they have not responded to our request. And
Hmm.
so, PJM can stop their payments. But the greater concern is that, as you mentioned in your opening, they are the largest. And so, what does that mean for the other operators, right? Does that mean that now other operators will also say, you know what, we're not going to consider this? We, on behalf of the Alliance, I believe that energy efficiency has a monetary value, and that if you don't have to build something because of what we're offering to the grid, there should be a fair payment for that.
So it sounds like they're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. They're saying you can't measure it, or we don't know how to measure it. So therefore, we're just not going to bother paying for it, as opposed to let's figure out a way to measure it.
I mean, I think, yeah, very simply that's kind of what it appears to be. And I think it wasn't that PJM was saying that they can't measure it at all. I think what they were saying is that certain entities were getting payments, i.e. utility companies, but that they were not providing, that those were not measurable or verifiable. I think so. I don't want it to say that PJM was saying that everything, because it wasn't just, there were other than just utilities that were impacted by this decision, but they were saying that certain of the entities who were getting it don't deserve it because it's not measurable, they can't verify. And I
Mm.
think, to your point, that is kind of throwing out the baby with the bathwater because everybody got swept into it. It was a broad decision.
So even if you were measuring it, you were still
You were still
denied the payments.
impacted.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Now, I think the PJM may be doing something on the back end. I don't know, but everyone would have been impacted by that decision.
So there's a possibility, perhaps, that they'll work with some companies individually if they are properly measuring it,
I think
and
my understanding, or the scuttlebutt, is yes, that certain companies that are doing that have been able to kind of negotiate something with PJM.
but that's kind
Um,
of a tough way to go. And
I mean, I think ultimately what I would rather see is a clear definition from FERC, but in a collaborative process that says this is what we want, this is what we need, these are the tools, and this is how you're going to measure and verify. This is how we're going to figure out like how much people should be paid. What is it based on? Whatever that is. I think that process is fair, but I also think it's in alignment with what our broader goals are in terms of energy transition. And I also think it's just a smart thing to do.
Right, right. And so FERC hasn't responded to your request for a technical evaluation, but is that unusual? I mean, FERC operates in a very slow way. Would you file this? Was it back in November? I'm trying to
We
remember.
filed ours, I think, in July or
Oh,
August.
July. Okay.
And then the decision for PJM's request, I think, came after our filing, but they were pretty
Mm.
close together in timing. But remember now, in all of this is that we just got, right, 5 full commissioners appointed in June. We just had an election. So, I think for us at the Lions, you take a moment to see how things kind of shake out and figure out what our next step is. And FERC's lack of response isn't helpful. So we do have to do something, but I don't know that we know exactly what our next step should be at this point.
It's always tricky with FERC. It's a complicated organization.
Yeah.
So that's the recourse then. It's not really an appeal, but sort of an attempt to sort of broaden the discussion, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we would like to see happen is really let's have a broadening of the discussion. At the same time, right, we have out there FERC Order 2222, and it would be our argument that when that says that demand response right has a value in wholesale markets, why wouldn't efficiency also have a value? Right,
Right.
whatever that is, why wouldn't we get that? So I think, what we're asking for is a conference that allows us to explore all of these issues so that we get to something that is fair, but also that is consistent across marketplace. We all know what the rules are.
And FERC 2222, for our listeners who don't know, is a landmark ruling that gave distributed energy kind of a new standing in wholesale markets. And energy efficiency is a form of distributed energy. So
Right.
hence it should have that standing too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. So tell me, what else is ASC working on these days?
The biggest thing that I think we have been working on and focusing on is really as we move forward, we have a new administration coming on. We've had some historic investments in energy efficiency over the last 3.5, 4 years. And so we want to really talk about and share, right, what has been the impact of these investments, what are the things to come, and begin to work with the new administration on some of their goals. And one of which is around affordability, which is certainly a priority of us at the Alliance, right? And we know that energy efficiency, right, if you want to talk about how do you make people's energy bills more affordable, we are talking about energy efficiency. And so we have a lot of opportunity, I think, to do some really big things with the expansion of weatherization funds, the more money going to our state energy offices and the work that they do at a community level and understanding what each state really, really needs. And so for us at the Alliance, we want to be able to amplify the way that energy efficiency meets the larger affordability goals that are set out.
Yeah, and it seems like that's going to be so important because electricity rate bills are just really going up. I mean, there's so much pressure right now, concerns over, increasing need for electricity going forward because of electrification and AI and data centers and all of these sort of issues that are coming up that are putting pressure on rates. It seems like this will really heighten discussion of how to bring more energy efficiency into the system, especially this discussion about data centers. I mean, we're hearing so much about these phenomenal numbers of how much energy these data centers are going to need. And in my mind, the question always is, okay, but what about if you start applying more energy efficiency to their systems, which is typically
Absolutely.
what happens with technology? Are we really going to need all of this? Are we going to need to build all these power plants we think we'll need to build?
Well, I would argue that if we invested more in efficiency, we definitely wouldn't need to build as many as we think we do. So we're at a really interesting, I think, point in this energy transition discussion, right? Because we do have rising energy demand. We do have, right, a push-pull in terms of permitting reform, whether or not we're going to get it, what is it going to look like, how quickly will it happen, what's going to be included. We've got the economics around building more stuff and financing, right? New capital finances. And what does that do to people's rates and bills when utilities are trying to make decisions about building infrastructure for the future, and what are the resources that will be attached to that? All of these things are happening at the same time. And then here I come along saying, hey, what I really think you should do is take that money and invest in energy efficiency. And I think that my argument is a valid one, right? That my savings are for duration, right? And that it will allow flexibility for us to be able to do these other things that we still need to do at a better cost point for consumers. And so I think our role at the Alliance, certainly my job with the Alliance for the next however long it takes, is to really be able to not only amplify that, but to also be able to find partners who believe the same things and we can work together to find solutions, whether that be at FERC or quite frankly, even with members of Congress or state regulators to kind of get us there.
And the kind of nice thing about energy efficiency is it strikes me as sort of a nonpartisan energy resource, right? It's not, there's a lot of forms of green energy that kind of have the reputation of being on one side of the aisle. And then there's the fossil fuels that have the reputation of being on the other side of the aisle. But energy efficiency is pretty benign when it comes to politics.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we at the Alliance have been blessed for 47 plus years of having a bicameral, bipartisan, honorary board of advisors. And we really believe deeply in sticking to the framework that we have and working with them and getting their best advice and counsel on the work that we're doing and finding ways to really, quite frankly, support them around their efficiency initiatives. And so, at the end of the day, I think we all share this one value of being focused on customers in our communities. And certainly, I think we all appreciate the importance of efficiency in serving those customers and communities. But in this moment, I think our job is to get the larger ether to understand the importance of efficiency. And I would say the critical role that efficiency plays in our grid reliability, in our community resilience, in addressing climate change, quite frankly, in our economic growth. As we think about building our businesses and workforce development and where those jobs are and reshoring of manufacturing. And so much of this work lies within the energy efficiency community. And so it's getting people to see that and then aligning ourselves and partnering so that we can get it done.
Very nice. And you and I had talked earlier about one of the difficult things about messaging around energy efficiency is basically you're making something out of nothing.
Yeah, that's literally what you're doing. And I think about that conversation often because that is what you're doing. But I have an example I thought about because I was thinking about this, when I was cooking for Thanksgiving. I'm always up against the clock on Thanksgiving because I always try to do everything on that day. And I'm always trying to make way more, 25 meals. And I have one
I understand
oven.
Completely.
Right? I have one oven and one stove. And so this year I thought, you know what, I'm going to use my time more efficiently. And I used ChatGPT to inform me on which dishes I could make a few days early.
Ooh.
Right?
Cool.
And so
That's really
things
cool.
that were prepared early. So I started on Sunday and certain things were already prepped and prepared. And then I used ChatGPT to help me figure out when I could cook things, what things need to be timed in the oven at what time so that dinner would be on the table by 5.
Wow.
Right? And so my efficient technology was literally ChatGPT.
Oh, that's so
right?
cool.
And so instead of me running around, I had this technology that allowed me to do this. And so And it did reduce my energy during the course of Thanksgiving. We all feel, if you're the cooker, you feel harried and exhausted by the time the food's on the table. And I got to enjoy my day because I did it this way, right? And so it is this idea, I think, of helping people see energy efficiency, but efficiency differently, right? I was doing the same thing. I did it differently.
You produce the same thing. You produce the same
I produced
meal.
the same thing with
But
less emotional energy.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about here.
That's great. You totally opened up Christmas for me in a new way now. So.
Oh, thank you.
It's too late
I'm
for
always
Thanksgiving.
Always working on my messaging, trying to find ways to resonate these big ideas that we have.
That's wonderful. This is such a great discussion. Is there anything else that you would like to add for our audience?
just please come visit our website, www.asc.org. Reach out to me directly, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm really serious. We really, at the Alliance, would love to have anyone who's interested in these topics, who wants to partner, whether you agree with us or not. Let's start this discussion so that we can get to some real solutions.
That's wonderful. And please keep us posted on how things go with this FERC decision. We would love to, let our audience know if there's any kind of decision that does come up, or if they do convene this kind of collaborative discussion. So we'll keep people posted in our newsletter.
Absolutely. Will do. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Paul. I really enjoyed this discussion.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you for joining us today on the Energy Changemakers podcast. I hope today's conversation has inspired you to think differently about the role of distributed energy in our society. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform and consider leaving us a review. You can help us shape the dialogue around energy. Go to energychangemakers.com, subscribe to our newsletter, and join our community. Together, we can make a real difference in how quickly we can make our grid local, equitable, and clean.